Hi, I'm Mikey, and this is Tyler. We're the founders of Innovative Start Organization, a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy. And in today's episode, we have three topics for you guys. Again, in all of our episodes, we talk about financial and economic topics that are related to the demographic that we try to talk to, just to kind of give you some insight, the facts, just a little bit of commentary on, what our thoughts are on some of the news that comes out. And again, we always say we try to inform, not persuade. So do your own due diligence as we talk about these topics. And yeah, so quickly jumping into some stuff. I know there's been a lot of talk around some of the student loan things, some of the things around job reports, and just unemployment in general. Some good things that we've talked about in previous episodes a few times, and then also talking about just the housing market. I know that's a big thing, especially if you're in that range or you're looking. I know a lot of people on the older side of Gen Z and then on the younger side of millennials are trying to enter the housing market, and it's not the best that it's at, but recent reports have shown that there's been an influx of supply. So, not a major difference as far as like what you'll be getting uh, for interest rates and things like that, but it should help as far as there's more open availability versus like a more constrained market. But yeah, but we'll start with one of the biggest topics here, which is some stagflation. If you're not aware what stagflation is, um, it's basically when prices don't necessarily reflect just how like the movement is. So I would say like things are stagnant, right? Nothing changes, but at the same time, the price of the product or whatever else changes. So it just shows slow economic growth. There's inflation is kind of combating like again like at the same time it's like if your money doesn't change or things of around you or something like that. As a simple explanation. And also with the slow growth, you have inflation, so your purchasing power is not there anymore. Now you're not coinciding with the market movement. Better way to put that is you're not basically being parallel to the inflation. Essentially, one part's kind of a flat line, the other one's going up. Um, Other ways, I guess, to better explain that. But yeah, essentially, as of April 2026, GDP, which we've also talked about in previous episode, is hovering around 2.4%. And I think also too is driven largely by the current ongoing conflict around oil. We've already talked about that too. I think about just as far as like gas prices. Everybody has seen it. Everybody's aware of the conflict and everything else that's being around why gas prices are where they are. Um, Good thing to check in on that too. Also, some things to look at too is, I think a lot of people, when we talk about oil and oil prices, is, does the U.S. have its own oil? The question or the answer to that is yes. Does the U.S. use their own oil? That's for you to to Google and find out. But you'll be astonished about how all of that plays out, why the reasons are behind that. But again, we're here to inform, not persuade. So yeah, and I think one of the biggest things too that you'll see is that not only do gas prices and oil change based off of demand, so you'll see prices creep up around the summertime, regardless of whatever conflict is going worldwide or regardless of the economic status, just because there's an increase in demand because obviously there's probably people more traveling, yada yada, versus like wintertime when people can be shut in and snow and just a lot of factors that way. So now you have the influx in demand plus the ongoing conflict that is causing a sharper increase in gas prices and oil prices. So just a quick little economic piece there. But yeah, and I think one of the other things too to deal with that is some other things that play into stagflation is job reporting and just the ability or the availability of jobs. So what we've noticed is that one, there's been a lot of job cuts across the board. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that play into that. I sent to Tyler the other day a report that talked about the the average, I think it was age of a person that was getting hired, which was like 49 years old. I think people are just looking for more experience, not looking for entry level because they just want to get straight to it, right? If somebody knows everything, the ins and outs, you don't want to pay for training or whatever else, right? And one person who's experienced can do the job of three people, might as well just go with that experienced people. Might as well not, open up those roles. So there's a lot of slope to there, and then there's also like the technological aspects with like AI and stuff like that that plays a major factor. But yeah, I was gonna say, Tyler, what are your thoughts as far as like some of those things that we're seeing? One, like I said, around gas prices, employment, job security is extremely important. I think a lot of people are not jumping jobs as much, but I'll pass it over to you, Tyler.
Yeah, these are all good things. I mean, my gas bill has doubled, like how much, which it makes sense, but man, it's crazy. I'm curious, honestly, in the next few months as these, like the gas prices really flush out to the economy, how this is gonna look. Airfare, but even little things like I was just talking to someone that's in the handyman business, and they're like, they drive around, they're gonna have to go up on their costs because they're driving between properties and things like that. It's something we may not think about, groceries, things like that. So I and it makes just the situation. I'm just curious how long it will stay this way. Nobody knows, obviously, but
Yeah.
and one thing that's kind of interesting that I need to do some more research on that I'll admit is like stagflation in general. Like they, at least in my economics classes, we talked a lot about inflation, deflation, but we didn't talk a lot about stagflation. Um, so I want to do some more personal research, just like how long this is going to stay around, because some people will say that this is just brief.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it'll be brief or not. So that's one thing I'm doing on my end as well.
Yeah. And I think it could also be a recession indicator. So a lot of times when people within that field try to look at like, what are some things that we've seen in the past and how do they match up to those past recessions? And, we have unemployment that people take a look at, right? There's different age ranges that you can look at that also tell a story, right? The younger demographic of people, and we talked about this in the last episode too. Unemployment versus underemployment, right? Unemployment meaning that those people don't have any type of job or are unable to get a job, and then the underemployment means that those people are in a field that they did not specialize in or something like that. So that'd be somebody with an economics degree working at a grocery store. So those are some things to look at just to see. Obviously, the housing market, inflation, the stagflation piece, again, like I said, a real stagnant piece where it's more parallel to like a just there's no influx essentially, and then you have your inflation going up at the same time. So again, prices and everything else is going up, but jobs and everything else is staying stagnant. And then you're wondering like, how does oil and stuff like that play into pricing as well, right? If it takes more or if it's costing more for something that's already being used and you still need to see a profit or you still need to change your margins, you're going to have to slightly increase prices in other places. So people just say, oh, it's just gas, but it also, other trades, food, consumer products, anything that has to be shipped. That thing that's on the big rig or the 14 wheeler or whatever you want to call it, but anything that's getting shipped essentially is going to those costs are going to go up because obviously gas prices are up a little bit more. One thing we can also take a look at is just when it comes to like what does it mean and what can you do. Um, Obviously, you can look at one just budgeting is always the case. Whenever these pieces of news come out, it's just kind of go back in, see, and budgets are not supposed to be something that's just set in stone. You have to be flexible with it. So if things changes, right, prices, gas prices, things like that, the cost of food, the goods, whatever it is, right? What are some items that you can, push off until, potentially that everything gets corrected? Is it something, know your needs from your wants, right? Maybe your budget has a lot of wants in there. Maybe you've been, overspending in the want category, and it's good to still have wants. I never want to tell anybody like, oh, you don't, that's something that you shouldn't have or whatever else. But those are good because that plays into your budget, helps you manage your money. So it doesn't always have to be that way, but just always reconsider your budget when it comes to the news around rising prices, and also just make sure that you're always, enhancing your skills. When it comes to job security, I think a lot of people think, if you're doing well or whatever else, you should be pretty stable, but companies can always, flip the script at any moment. So always be enhancing your own skill set, always be enhancing your resume. The best you can do is prepare yourself for any possibly, anything that can happen to you. And regardless if you think it will, it's always better be prepared than to, be on a more of a high horse and say like, oh, I'm pretty stable, because you just never know. So, um, yeah. And then kind of jumping into that too, because I think this is also another like, you jumped off of one spike just onto another, is the student loan piece. So if you are a recent graduate or a student right now with federal student loans, the SAVE plan, which was basically enacted under Biden's administration, um, was used to help students who were getting into the repayment process essentially have a forbearance. So that forbearance basically, whenever you were ready to start paying and such, you could, but it gave you the opportunity to at least hold off on paying your student loans for the time being. And obviously, there's more into the SAVE plan and things that go into that. You can do your own research in that, but just a quick explanation. So, anyways, the coming July, the SAVE plan will no longer be a thing. So, check in with your current servicer for your student loans. If you have personal loans or whatever else that's not federally related, this obviously doesn't relate to you. Another thing too that people look into is always like consolidating their student loans. So if you're somebody that's like, you know, to be with that carrier or whatever, and you want to consolidate it, maybe you can get a better interest rate. That's just one, because if you take a student loan every year, and depending on if it's unsubsidized or subsidized, they all have different interest rates. So if you want it all under one interest rate and you want that whole amount, obviously you can talk to whatever consolidating place, banking place that you want to go to, and see what type of interest rate you can get if that's what you want to do. That's just an option, but always know your options too. And yeah, and one thing to take a look at too is interest paid on student loans is something that you can also look at too, is when it comes to tax time as well. Um, it helps, I guess, as far as whenever you're doing that, you'll get a form if you paid any interest on your student loans and yada yada. The other piece of the SAVE plan, um, again, there'll be communications sent out. So if you haven't gotten an email, which you should have, I mean, I received one, you should always just check in with whoever your person is or your loan establishment, and then just make sure that everything is on par, so that they're not defaulting you into any plan that you can't afford to do. So one of the plans that's there is an income-driven one, which is basically, takes however much money you make, and then they'll set up your payments that way. But there's different ways that you can do it. If you want to set up your own payment plan, whatever that looks like, by all means do so. Another big thing to take a look at is make sure when you're switching plans that it's allowed within your budget. So if anything that comes across as far as like, what we just talked about, which is managing your budget to economic changes, and then also to stuff that's personally to you, which is like your student loans. But yeah, I think those are some really good pieces. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Tyler. What do you think?
This is really interesting because I mean, some of this started during COVID, and they put
Mm-hmm.
them on pause, and um, this just goes along the lines, and we talk about this a lot, but just make sure you know what you're signing up for, especially for college, and how the loans works. Just like you mentioned, subsidized versus unsubsidized. One of those will start accruing interest, the other one won't while you're in school.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all good things to think about. And then, making sure you're aware of the interest rate. Like Mikey said, some of these rates are different. My rates are different in, you're like, okay, well, why does that matter? Well, some will say you pay down the higher interest rate ones before the other ones. Uh, this all kind of goes along the same lines. Like I do think there's something to say as stagflation is coming, as prices are rising. Like there's just something, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. There's just something to say about having no debt. And I
Mm-hmm.
know some people are against that and paying things off, but I will say I'm not there yet, but I'm sure it's a great feeling because there is a lot of uncertainty and it's freeing too. I'm a firm believer some of this is psychological when it comes to just debt, paying things off. That's just my opinion. So that's my 2 cents a little bit, and also just yeah, I would. I know SoFi was doing a big push for consolidation. Um, it sounds like they have a good program. I have not used it personally, so I cannot attest to that 100%. But I would just look into some of these programs to see what you have going on and if there's any opportunities there. Whether that's student loans, car loans, I think it's always good to shop around. Same with insurance as well, every few years.
Yeah, I think those are all good
That's what I
points
got.
too. I think another thing too that if you are somebody, right? Because I think every individual has their own opinion on what it's like to have loans and just to be in debt. And some people are like, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. Other people are like, I can't wait to get out of this because you would feel financially free, right? Even if you didn't have the most money or whatever, it's like, at least I don't have any debt. At least I don't have anything to pay off. At least there's nobody that's like charging my account, right? The money that I have is because I'm paying something that I want to pay, not because it's something that I incurred for whatever reason, whether it's a home loan, car loan, student loan, any type of loan, just to be free. And there's a lot of people that will attest to that. I think like Tyler was saying, like I don't even remember outside of like the I think before getting to college, I didn't have any debt, and you don't even really understand how it feels because all your life, right, nothing gets tied to you. So when you get to college and the debt starts to come in, and then so to really think about it, you're like, wow, like, this is a lot of money I've just racked up. So I think what people need to understand is that you don't know or you don't remember the feeling until it's too late, and then once you get into it, that's all you can remember essentially. I People would tell you, adults would tell you, right? Unless there's an adult that's very financially free, but no, there is no aspect about adulting besides being, you know, I guess able to do anything that you want without needing a cosign or whatever. But adulting is a difficult task, and it can be even more difficult if you're unprepared. So, smallest preparation in certain areas goes a long way. And so that's what we always try to tell you guys. It's like do your research when these news pieces come out. Like take a little dive in it. Do some more googling or whatever else. Technology is of abundance right now. There's no reason for you to still be um, uninformed about that, and it makes a big deal too because you can help those around you as well that don't understand these topics or why it's impacting them. So yes, we always stress that. But jumping into our last piece here, and again, we don't want to always be doom and gloom with our topics, but it also helps just to see, right? Because the gloom can just the better part of it can really just come from you see this, are you prepared for it, how can you prepare for it. That should be the action item or the takeaway from these discussions that we have. So yeah, jumping into our next topic, just talking about the housing market. There's a lot of things that are important to adults right now, especially if you're fresh out of college and everything else. Maybe you're not looking for a house, but you know 5 to 10 years down the line, once you do get out of college, right? Maybe that might be something within your goals. I think a lot of people always say for our generation that we'll always be renters, never buyers. It really just depends. Area also depends. The housing market, yes, is expensive, but it's more expensive in certain states and places. So If you're fine, if you want that dream house, you might have to uproot something else, and that just might be the case. I know a lot of people say like they'll rather choose a certain area because of what's there or whatever, or they'll choose a certain area because it fits their whatever it is. But just things to think about as far as it goes. So looking at the housing market, um, right now I think it's saying that inventory has finally increased 9% year over year. Essentially, that's just saying that the available houses on the market have increased by 9%. And then it's also saying that mortgage rates have stabilized around the Sun Belt. Sun Belt being, I guess, more the southern area, if you want to take that. But essentially, another thing too, because I can probably speak to this a little bit more as well. But when it comes to the housing market, when it comes to understanding everything, I think too, another what other people will also see, right? There's a lot of aspects that factor into it. If you're a renter, there's no shame in renting. Essentially, you might have different goals. With renting comes a lot less stress of being a homeowner. So, and I'm sure Ty can also to attest to that as well. You basically pay for all the things, the convenience, essentially, when you're a renter. So that's to have maintenance. That's to have, a clubhouse that has a gym, a pool, or whatever else, right? You're paying for that price. You're also paying for potentially location as well, right? Are you near the city? Your renting prices are probably gonna be a little bit more expensive versus if you're on the outskirts or whatever that looks like, highway access to there's different ways that'll fluctuate what renting prices are. When you're a homeowner, though, right? Not only are you obligated to a loan too, right? This is income. You also have other aspects of cost that you don't know. But at the same time, that is something that you're building onto. It's also too, if you're thinking long term, I think that's the best way. I think a lot of people also they have different viewpoints on whenever they buy a home. Some people call them starter homes, which is like your first home before you get your forever home. So it really just depends on what your values are. It's not necessarily that individuals are buying a home for themselves, but it's more of a family oriented thing. So it's hard to just come across people who are by themselves buying homes. It's almost the the minority to an extreme extent. But I'm gonna turn it over to you, Tyler, to see what are your thoughts about that and stuff that you've heard.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot. Some some people just don't need to own a home, and that's totally fine. I don't, like if you want to have the freedom to get a new job and move cities, or maybe it's just to even not have to worry about cutting the grass or whatever, worrying about pest control and all of these things. That is totally fine. You can still invest in the markets and make money and live a comfortable life. So just know that. And, you know, anyway, I will say though, there is some freedom if someone wants to settle down. There is some freedom. I don't know freedom, but there's some stability in knowing that like a landlord is not going to continue to increase rent on you, or the landlord
Mm-hmm.
can't kick you out and say, hey, I'm going to sell this house to someone, or like, I'm finally going to sell this, I'm not renting out to you anymore, or whatever. So there's that controllability aspect of owning a home to an extent. So these are all things that you know you can you can weigh the pros and the cons, but we got to get out of the trap of thinking that everybody needs to own a home as immediately as possible, because I just don't think that's the case, in my opinion. I think it's dangerous too, because then people start, I mean, you can see this, Mikey. People our age, people even no matter age, I mean, they're just rushing to try to buy a house, and it's like it's they're anxious and all these things. At that point, it's like, hey, like, is this really needed? Can this wait? Would you rather travel? Would you rather, if you have a hobby, maybe someone likes to do horseback riding, or they like to work on cars? I don't know. Like, there's you can put other money towards your hobbies, and instead of buying a home. There's pros and cons to everything, and it's really individualistic
Yeah.
to your circumstance. Is what is my take on it. But regarding the recent housing pattern, I'm if you run the numbers, there's a lot of people that are saying that we're here in these mortgage like the 6 to 7% range for a few years now, especially with inflation if it's going to increase, with the oil prices increasing. I mean, I don't. Nobody's saying. I mean, you do your own research, but I'm not seeing a lot of people that are emphasizing rates cutting anytime soon. Um, so it is interesting, but I also like the housing situation is very city driven, like you mentioned. Austin, Texas, that was booming during COVID, is obviously different than somewhere else, maybe in the Midwest or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things too uh, is if you've ever looked at like a house, right? Say you're comparing houses in two different cities. Obviously, where you can be in a city area and get an affordable house, the income range is also going to change. So, one thing you can look at is consumer price index, especially state by state. So, say you're graduating and you have an offer, and you have the ability to potentially move. You have options essentially, right? Don't just go where you feel like, oh, I'm going to make the most money. Look at the difference essentially, right? Are you making more money, but then paying more just in the fact of where you are? Because then the pricing point of, or not necessarily the pricing point, but how much you make, the income that you get can also be equivalent to that same state and be $3,000 to $5,000 of a difference. But it's the same, it gives you the same buying power essentially. And it's weird to think about it that way because somebody could be making more money, but their expenses can be a lot higher. Their rent can be a lot higher. Now, one thing that I noticed as living here in Arizona, and then I was also looking at rent prices in my hometown of St. Louis. Some of those places have rent on par with here in Arizona. And now in Phoenix, which is, I'm pretty sure, the fifth largest city in the US, St. Louis is nowhere near that. But to have the same pricing as far as it goes, when I feel like things here in Phoenix are a little bit more expensive, people might argue different. But if you live in the Midwest area, I think that's probably where you get a lot of the cheaper housing. But also, you can look at a map and it'll probably show you like what all the equivalent income ranges are per state. And I've already seen that too with my own eyes, especially when I graduated. I was in the same field, same market as another person that graduated. They stayed in Missouri. I went here. The pay difference was about 4K, but at the same time, they were only paying I think like 1,100 in rent for a two bed, two bath versus that's a studio here. So it's like I said, it's interesting to see because at the same time, like the expenses match the income. That's all you need to look at. So if you're graduating and that's something that that comes as part, I don't think there's a lot of people that are graduating and then jumping right into buying a house. But there probably are people that have done that. I think I know at least a couple of people that I know of who did that, but they're in a different category of being able to do that. So um, that's not necessarily something that you got to jump into once you get out of college. I think that I highly doubt that people that graduate, that's like the first thing that they get on their head is like, oh, I need to buy a house. So in reality, just make sure you pay attention just to just overall market trends. Don't be in a rush in anything. When people ask, when you're in college and people ask you like, where do you see yourself in 5 years and stuff like that, it's hard to think about. But then when you get out of college, time somehow moves a little bit faster, and before you know it, those 5 years will come, and you'll be like, is this where I pictured myself? You can get in your head about those things, and so how financial aspects play into just overall awareness and just mental health and financial stability is an extremely important part of that, and that's why we talk about these topics and try to let you guys give you some insight, give you some info, give you some commentary, so that you can open up your eyes and your mind to really see what it's like and really start to pay attention to these clues. So again, when I was in college, I could care less. I wish I was paying attention. I think everybody that gets older and they make whatever mistake it is, they're like, you know what? These are the things I could have done. So If you're in that case, there's no point of passing that repeated process on to the next generation, even your next sibling, right? Maybe you graduate and you have a sibling entering. Just make sure that they know you have a cousin or whatever family member. Be that point of, okay, here's what I've done, here's what I could have done better. Even though it might not be, you know, I guess in a sense of on time for you, but it won't be too late for them to get started. So those are our topics today, though. We really hit on stuff, and we talk about things again over and over again too as it updates too. So you can check in past episodes of what we talked about certain topics. We've hit on the housing market, we've hit on inflation, we've hit on these pieces about student loans, what that means. We really want to emphasize what it means to understand when these news pieces comes out, and then how you can act upon it. What's your action item? What's your takeaway? So it's extremely important to think about that. But we're gonna wrap up today's episode. You can catch us on all platforms: YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And yeah, we'll catch you all guys in the next episode. We appreciate your time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys.